Welcome to Choices Were Made. It's crazy to think this podcast almost ended before it began because we couldn't get our microphones to work. We want to talk to you today about how we got here making this podcast. My name is Evelyn, and I'm 31 years old.
And I'm Miranda, and I'm 23 years old.
I want to start by saying thank you to my sister. It's been a dream of mine for a really long time to start this podcast, but you're the one who really got the ball rolling because every time I would bring it up to you, you would tell me, "You should start a podcast. Like, you listen to so many of them. You should just do it." But a couple of years ago, I actually came up with the name of the podcast, and I told you I have the perfect name, this podcast, and it's gonna be called Choices Were Made, and we're gonna talk to people about the terrible decisions that they've made and how they overcame them, because I feel like for me, there's this recurring theme where I go through these bad decisions, and then I feel like I'm just never going to recover from them. I'm
Mhm.
just gonna be in this horrible place forever, and there's no way out. I'm curious about, is there a way that we can prevent these bad decisions or even just diminish them? So so myself, I've been in and out of therapy since I was 15 years old. And I just remember like never feeling like okay, like as if I was incapable of being happy. And that's weird because I don't remember having an unhappy childhood. Like I do remember feeling like our parents, and we're gonna say my mom and my dad, but that's just the way we talk, we have the same parents. But I remember my mom always going out of her way to take us to Disneyland and theme parks and just do everything for us, and we grew up with a bunch of cousins, so our house, we always had a pool. All the parties would be at our house, and it's weird because I don't really remember ever having a reason to feel happy, but just knowing that I just wasn't. And when I was about 15, my mom, I think she could kinda notice that I wasn't okay, and she put me in therapy, but it was very hush hush, I feel like. I really don't feel like therapy, the world of mental health really opened up until COVID, and now there's all these resources that there just wasn't before, and I remember feeling like they would take me to therapy, but then it was never addressed as therapy. It was like, "We're gonna take her to the doctor, or we're gonna
Mhm.
take her to an appointment," but it was never, "We're gonna take her to therapy." Just never talked about it. Like, I would go to therapy, and I would talk to this, no disrespect at all, but just this white lady who I felt like knew nothing about what I was going through, and then I would go home. Like, it was just a vicious cycle of me going to therapy, talking about my problems, and then coming home and living the exact same life, no change, and then going back to therapy, talking about the problems again. There was just no repair of anything, and I had no one to talk to about it because I wasn't supposed to talk about it. I wasn't supposed to talk about going to therapy. I wasn't supposed to talk about being depressed, and at that time, I didn't have that even language to even know that I had depression, and so it was really hard because I just felt like I just am talking about this problem that just never is gonna seem to get fixed because there's no solution coming to the table, and I just remember feeling so much shame about feeling this way, like, feeling like I'm causing this and it's my fault, and I didn't have anyone at that time to talk to except for my therapist, and I didn't really feel like she knew what I was going through, and the advice that it was more like she would listen and I would talk, and then there would be nothing
Mhm.
besides that. And I always remember growing up and having this thought about, well, your life starts when you get married. So if I'm married, that means I'll be happy, right? I just remember always thinking, okay, when I get married, this is going to go away. This is just temporary. I'll be cured. And so when I was 19 years old, I met my now husband, and I remember meeting him at a party, and this is gonna sound so cringe, but I don't know how else to explain it. It was love at first sight. Like, I saw him, and on my way home, I told my friend, "I'm gonna marry that guy," and she was like, "You're so stupid," and I was like, "No, I am," and And so we started dating, and everything was super good for us, and it was pretty scandalous because he worked for my dad. So we really didn't want to tell anybody because we weren't sure if it was gonna go anywhere, and he didn't wanna get fired, so we didn't tell anyone, but obviously that was short lived. And he, at the time, had just moved to America, I think 1, maybe 2 years before I met him. And so he didn't speak English, and we didn't really have anything in common, but I just remember him being just the kindest person I've ever met. And not just him, but his entire family. They welcomed me with open arms and would invite me to these family parties, and it just felt so comfortable being with this person who was just so nice. And I will say that I'm thankful that he was a good person, because if he was an abusive person, I don't think I would have been here today. I just remember just these 2 kids. I was 19 years old, he was maybe 20, but we never lived together. We never even had an overnight trip. So 6 months after we met, we got engaged, and 6 months after we got engaged, we got married, and there we were, 2 kids, married. We had no communication skills. We had horrible relationship with money, and we're just trying to make this life together without really knowing anything about life. We're just kids growing up together, and it was really hard, and I remember feeling so happy the day of my wedding, being like, "This is it. This is gonna cure my depression," and let me tell you, that is so far removed from the truth, and that started us on a 4-year journey of just a terrible, terrible marriage. Not because we didn't love each other, because we've always loved each other, but because we had no idea what we were doing. He, at this point, didn't even know I had depression. He didn't even know that I struggled with my mental health, because I still had so much shame around feeling this way, and there was still so much stigma around mental health that I didn't wanna tell him. And so, I'm going into this marriage thinking, "Well, I'm not gonna tell him that I'm depressed. He's just
Yeah,
gonna make it better. It's just the marriage will make it better." And that was so unfair to him, because obviously, he was not qualified to help me with the mental health issues I was going through. That was not his job, but I also didn't wanna tell him, "Hey, I need help," because I was so ashamed of what he would think, or that he was just gonna reject the idea, or not believe me. I always felt like mental health is this disease. You have diseases that can't be seen, and so
mm,
people think they're not real
yeah,
until they go through them. So it's like, if I'm walking around with a broken leg, everyone's gonna ask me how I'm doing, if I need something, "Do you need help?" But I'm walking around with all of these pains in my heart, and nobody wants to help me because half of them don't even believe me,
yeah,
and it was it was really hard. So there we are on, 4 years of misery, and him just kind of trying to do anything to make me happy, and me not being able to accept any of those things, and then being unhappy. And so about the 6th year of marriage, I would say things started to get better, because I had finished university and I got a pretty good job. And then he started his construction company. And so at least our financial problems diminished some. So we were kind of in a better place at that point, and so we were kinda good for a while, and then, end of the 6th year, I decided that I was ready to get pregnant. I was like, "Okay, we're doing good, we're financially stable now." He had been asking me since we got married to have kids, and I wasn't ready, and so I was like, "Okay, I think I'm ready for this now." So, I decided to go off birth control without telling him, and before I get dragged, the reason that I made that decision was because I knew he wanted to have kids, and, my sister and I, in our family, on my mom's and my dad's side,
Mhm.
we have a lot of family with infertility, and so I wanted to make sure that if there was a problem, I would kinda get ahead of it. So I figured, well, we can try for 6 months, and then if I'm not pregnant, I could go to him and say, "Hey, we might have infertility issues that we wanna take a look at." I only told you
Yeah.
that I was off birth control, and I went off birth control in October, and I got pregnant in December. So 2 months later, I was pregnant, and I I remember that being the happiest time of my life. I was so excited that I was pregnant, and I told you about it,
Mhm.
and, I remember our mom had just her dog had just had puppies,
Uh-huh.
and I went over and I texted you, I was like, "Hey, come outside with a puppy," and I told you I'm pregnant, you punched me in the arm,
I did.
and I was like, "Don't punch me, I'm pregnant." And it was just so exciting, so then the next week you came over and you helped me decorate the entire living room with
With
balloons,
balloons.
and, I told him he got home that day, and he always jumps in the shower as soon as he gets home because he works in construction, and so he got in the shower, and then while he was in the shower, I brought all the balloons out, I put everything back where it was, and then I screamed at him through the shower door. I was like, "Don't come out in your underwear because we have company," because he always just comes out in, like,
Yeah.
his shorts or something right after he gets in we lived alone, it was just us, and so he was like, "Okay," so he comes out and he was like, "Are we having a party?" I was like, "No, I'm pregnant," and he didn't believe me. He was
Disregarded the pink and blue
I
balloons.
know, he got blue balloons, and he just did not, like, did not compute, and I told him, "No, I'm pregnant," and he just looked at the balloons like, "Wait, what's happening?" And he couldn't believe it. Like, I have a video, we might
Uh-huh.
post it later,
Yeah.
and even the whole day after that, he was shaking, like, he kept asking me, like, "Wait, are you serious?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm serious," and it began this, like, amazing time in my life where I had just the cutest baby bump, like, it was all baby. I was having a boy, so I was just all baby,
Mhm.
and he was the first grandchild on both sides of our family and the first boy on our side of the family because
Yep.
we're all sisters. And everyone was so excited. Everything was just perfect. Even the birth was perfect. And then this beautiful 7-pound baby was born, and everything in my life changed. And it was so fast that we didn't even know how to prepare for something like that because we were so excited that we didn't realize how much our life was gonna change and in what way. Like, you just can't
Mhm.
prepare for the change of having a baby in your life. And I remember I took 4 months off of work after my baby was born, and so I was just at home with this beautiful baby who needed me 24/7, and and people would come over to visit me, and it was all about the baby,
Mhm.
and only about like, nobody cared about me, about how I was doing, about if I needed anything, like, people would come over and they would love on this baby and hug him and hold him and just want to take him in because he was the first baby on both sides of our family for a long time, and I remember just feeling so lonely, like, there was
Mhm.
just no room for me to talk about my struggle because people would come over and they would ask like, "Oh, how are you doing?" And then the second I would say something that went against their narrative or perspective of motherhood, they would just shut me down.
Mhm.
Or they would correct me and be like, "No, but it's so beautiful. No, but don't feel like that." Or they would dismiss me.
Mhm.
And I I just remember feeling like the feeling of I love this baby so much, but this is so hard, and getting the understanding that that wasn't okay, that those things couldn't go together. I can't love this baby and it can't be it's hard. Those things can't be true.
Mhm.
And so it made me feel that if this is hard for me, then I don't love my baby. And that was the only thing that I could really understand at the time. And so it made me feel worse because it made me feel like I'm a bad mom because I feel that this is hard and other moms don't. It's not hard for them. It's only hard for
Mhm.
me. And so around that time, I went back to work and we got a nanny, and then we're just kind of going along trying to survive each day, and I things got really bad. I mean, me, I just felt like I I was right back in that place again of I'm so unhappy and I don't know why, and I don't know what to do anymore. Like, I have tried everything. I've tried getting married. I've tried having a baby, and nothing is working. Like, nothing is making me feel better. So, it got really bad. And at this point, I'm about 8 years into my marriage. My husband doesn't even know I have depression, still. He still doesn't know that I struggle with
Mhm.
mental health. And it got so bad that he told me, "You need to go to therapy." He's like, "Evelyn, you need to go to therapy because you're not okay, and you need to get help, and I can't help you." And I was like, I don't wanna go to therapy. I'm fine, like, it's okay, I'm just, I'm just feeling a little sad." He's like, "No, like, you need to go get help." And so I went reluctantly
Mhm.
to my healthcare provider, and I told them, I want to go to therapy, and then so they got me set up with therapy, but at this time, it was around 2022, I wanna say. So COVID was still happening, so at my healthcare provider, they had a huge, therapist strike, and so they didn't have any therapists in network. So they set me up with telehealth, and I told them, "Okay, well, I want a therapist who is a woman.
Mm.
I want her to speak Spanish, and I want it to be in person."
She doesn't ex
And this representative almost laughed, like, he almost I think he was trying to hold in a laugh because he just told me, "No, no, no,
Not possible.
absolutely, there's nothing with those criterias in our network." And so I had a dilemma. Do I want to go again to the therapist that can't relate to me and just go in circles talking about my
Mhm.
feelings and nothing changing like I have been doing since I was 15? Or do I wanna pay out of pocket and go to a different therapist who fits my needs? So I dragged my feet for about 6 months, and
Wow.
I was like, "I have to find the right therapist." So I was dragging my feet, and I finally found a therapist who fit all of my criterias. So I set up my appointment with her, and I will say that keeping that appointment was the hardest thing I've ever had to do because I didn't wanna go. I didn't wanna do this all over again. But I did, not because I wanted to. It was because my husband was worried for me, and for me, that was enough to if it got so bad that he could tell that I was not okay, then that was enough reason for me to go and get help. And so I went to the appointment, and I walk in there, and the therapist is like, "Okay, what brings you to therapy?" And I just straight up told her, "I don't wanna be here. I am not ready to get help, and I'm not gonna do anything you tell me." And and I'm surprised she didn't tell me to get lost. But she did. She just told me, "Okay, like, what's going on?" And I told her, "Well, I'm a new mom, and I am really struggling, and I just have this feeling that I can't be happy. Like, I've never been happy. I've never been able to be happy, and nothing traumatic has ever happened to me, and I don't understand why." And she asked me, "Does anyone in your family struggle from depression?" "Yeah, my mom and I think my grandma." And she tells me, "Did you know that depression is genetic?" And I am in no, I didn't know that, and I was like, "No, you're mistaken, lady. I caused this to myself. I did this. I just am have the inability to be happy." She said, "No, no, depression is genetic, and this is probably something that you were born with." And at this point, I had been in therapy for almost 15 years, and nobody had ever told me, "This isn't your fault. You didn't cause this." And so my entire life, I felt that this was something of my making, and it brings me back to this moment of feeling if I would have known this one thing, this one piece of information, how different would my life have been? And at that point, I was 29 years old, and not one person in my life had told me that depression is genetic. I was so angry that this thing that I realize now I didn't cause kept me back for so long from being happy and just not knowing that one thing. Because maybe if I would have known, I wouldn't have blamed myself. I would have gotten the right help that I needed, but I was angry, and honestly, I still am angry because even though I have gotten a lot of help now and I have done a lot of work to manage my depression, I am still angry because it it took away so many years of my life just because I didn't know this information. So then, you know, a few months ago, we found out that we were investing in a policy that at best is a Ponzi scheme, to put it nicely, and we didn't know it wasn't a good form of investment because based on someone in your life told you, "Hey, I have an understanding that those policies really aren't the best, so you should look into it." So, we started to look like crazy people into this policy, and we found out that it really wasn't a good form of investing, so I ended up taking my money out, and I lost about 60% of the money that I had contributed, and what hurt me the most was that it wasn't just my money, it was its future, because I was putting money in this investment for them for their college or for their future, and then to make matters worse, I had recommended it to people, and I now had to live with this feeling of I hurt them, even though it wasn't intentional. We did a bunch of research. Between the 2 of us, we did so much research on trying to understand this policy. So, after much research, I felt very defeated, and I went to my manager, who's a CPA, and I asked him, "Hey, do you know about these policies?" And he told me, "No, I don't know specifically all of the ins and outs, but I do know that those aren't good investments." And I felt like in that moment, he met me with such compassion. He helped me go through the information and understand it and understand why it's not the best investment, and he actually helped me understand how to pull my money out, all of these other things, and I'm so grateful to him for that, and I think it brought me to a place again of if I would have just had this one
Mhm.
piece of information because he did tell me, "You don't know much about those specific policies." But anyone who's trying to talk you out of a Roth or a 401k is probably trying to scam you. And the
Mm.
guy who sold us those policies,
Yeah,
that is the first thing he told us.
yeah.
Roth and 401ks are not good investments, and he talked us against them. And so I had this feeling of if I would have known that, I would have known to look out for those red flags, right? I
Yeah.
think when I talked to you about it, you told me something that really stuck with me that was like, well, at this point, we have to just take it as a loss and just next time do our due diligence and research for ourselves and not just take people's word for it. Because even though the advice to get these policies came from, someone close to us and the person who told us this policy also was someone close to us, You just have to do the research and find out what's best for you instead of, just taking someone's advice at face value. And so I definitely felt like, okay, well, like, now at least I know, obviously in hindsight, we can't really change it. Lastly, some time ago, we went to a concert. We went to see, this artist perform, and he's not famous. I wouldn't say he's
No.
famous, but if you know him, you know
Yeah.
him, and he's a cool guy. I would say I wasn't a fan of his music, and
He's a
then
specific
he's
taste.
just yeah, acquired taste. I would say I wasn't his fan, and then I saw him, "Yeah, I get you. I get your vibe now." And he's just like this, I don't know, he's this cool guy. And we went to go see him perform, and I remember him being up there, and he was up thanking his fans, and I remember him
All 30 of us.
all 30 of us, because every time we would go to his shows, like, nobody there except for us, and I do remember, he was up there, and he was thanking all his fans, and he said, "Getting to be here tonight is just me being able to live out my dream one more day."
Mm.
And that
Aw.
stuck with me so much because I'm thinking this guy is just out here. He doesn't know if this is gonna be his last show ever, but he's just out here living his best, doing his best performance, even if it's just for one last time.
Mhm.
And that really stuck with me. So the next day I Snapchatted you and I told you, "I have this great idea." It's a spin on my original idea for the podcast called Choices Were Made, but we talked to people about the decisions that they've made, but we also talked to professionals on the related subjects and tried to get advice or resources on the topics. And you responded very positively, said, "Let's just do it. Like, we have to stop talking about it. Let's just get it done." And you booked us an appointment, like, for a couple weeks later. And we got together and we started this plan on this podcast, but you were really the one who took the initiative and really got us to actually doing something about it. And me being able to do this podcast is just me being able to live out my dream each episode, regardless of, where it takes us. And for you, what do you think was different this time in comparison to all the other times that I've brought this subject up?
I feel like I remember that so differently. I feel like the way I remember it, obviously, you were always the one with the ideas. You really, initiative and, started researching and started ordering and started buying things and, organizing this room. I feel like I remember it the opposite.
But
That
you were the one who, I mean, you probably still have the Snapchat saved where
I probably do.
you were like, "Let's just do it, let's stop," like, you were so pumped about it. Me just being the person that I am, like, I would have never done this alone,
Mhm.
so you meeting me with such enthusiasm and so positively, it made me feel like, "Oh, maybe this is a good idea," and then we just got started, like, right away, even though I think this podcast idea has been in the making for maybe,
Yeah.
like, 2
So
2,
many
maybe
years.
3 years.
I feel like, personally, I've never been a podcast person. I'm always shows, documentaries. I've never been a podcast person, and then I started listening to that financial podcast, and that podcast would just have me addiction. I
Yeah.
had it on all day. So, I feel like after that, I was kind of like, if this guy can make a podcast, we can make a podcast. We can do it too. Um, so I feel like that's kind of why I was like, let's just do it. Even if no one listens to it or even if it's just for us. And I remember a little bit after we had met the first time, I get into it a little later, but I'm in school, so I have a small group that I meet with, and I remember sharing the idea with them, and I was like, "Well, my sister and I have this idea, and we just wanna know what kind of podcasts you listen to, just to see what was out there," and they gave me 30 different podcasts that they listen to, and I was very overwhelmed. I was like, "Oh my gosh, how are we ever gonna compare to all these people?" And what scared me was that half of them were famous people. So I'm like, they already have an in. They already have a way to get their podcast blowing up because they're famous. And honestly, that was really disheartening at the beginning. I was like, "Oh my gosh, how is this ever gonna work?" And at this point, I hadn't told them the concept yet. I had just told them that we had an idea in the making. So I do the research. I go back next week and I said, well, we have this idea of like having people on, talking about the choices of their lives and then having on an expert. And I was like, teaching the idea to them. And all of them were like, "Oh my god, that is an awesome idea." I have never heard anything like that. I don't even think anything like that exists on the podcast market. You have to do it. And at that point, I was like, "You know what? Yeah, we do have to do it."
Yeah.
She's like, "Yeah, I have no idea." And I was like, half of me was mad. Like what we're doing now, like talking about our emotions, like we were not raised like that. Like,
I think this is probably true for both of us that a lot of the things we're talking about today, we probably didn't know about each
yeah,
other
we didn't.
because we grew up in a house where nobody talked about their emotions,
Yeah,
not even sister to sister.
yeah. Which reminds me when you were talking about going to therapy at the beginning, I have which I don't think I've ever told you, but I have vivid memories of going with my mom to pick you up from therapy. And I never knew what we were doing there, obviously. I
Right.
was like, what, probably like 6
Yeah.
when you were in therapy? And I remember going and we were sitting in the waiting room and I was like, what is this place? I was like, this place looks
Yeah.
scary because it was like really dim lighting.
Yeah.
I remember sitting there and I was like, I don't like this feeling. Like, what
Yeah.
is this? And even as a 6-year-old, I was like, this is where people come to talk about their emotions. Like, this is
Right, and it was just
upsetting.
never never a conversation.
Yeah. It's
Right.
like every time I drive past those buildings, I remember
I know, they were torn down,
they were
right?
yeah,
Yeah, they
kids
were
love
torn
stuff.
down,
Yeah.
yeah, a couple of years ago, and I
Mhm.
remember because we used to live close to there, and so
Yeah.
I would pass by it, and I remember passing by and even honestly driving past there gave me a flood of feelings of shame every time I drove past there because we lived close to there, but then they were torn down, but I still even if they're torn down, I still drive by there and I get this flash of memory of back when I was in therapy.
Thank you for listening to Choices Were Made. Be sure to join us next Monday for a brand new episode where I'll be sharing my own story and exploring the choices that shaped it. Make sure to like and follow us on Spotify, and if you're enjoying the show, please leave a 5-star review. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram for behind the scenes photos, updates, and extras you won't find anywhere else. See you next week.